If you've ever dipped even a toe into quantum mechanics, you know one thing.
Hmm.
It's married to complex numbers. We're talking about $8, the square root of -1, showing up in, well, every fundamental equation.
From the wave function to the dynamics, it's everywhere.
And for a century, physicists have sort of quietly accepted that at the smallest scales, reality itself might fundamentally require this mathematically exotic concept.
And that's been a massive conceptual hurdle. I mean, every other major pillar of physics, classical mechanics, electromagnetism, even general relativity gets along just fine with real numbers.
Right.
Quantum theory or QT, it always seemed to be the odd one out, demanding a mathematical structure that felt, I don't know, almost supernatural.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this isn't a new fight. We're talking about a debate that goes back nearly 100 years.
Oh, absolutely.
You can go all the way back to 1926 and Erwin Schrödinger.
Yeah.
When he developed his famous equation, he apparently struggled mightily with the role of Ital.
He really did. He was trying to find a pure physical interpretation for just the real part of his wave function, hoping he could avoid complex numbers altogether.
He wanted to treat quantum waves like classical waves.
Exactly. In classical physics, we often use complex numbers for, convenience. It just simplifies the trigonometry. But the physics is always ultimately about the real part. The actual height of the water wave.
The thing you can measure.
The thing you can measure. Schrödinger, he managed to generate a real number formulation, but he reluctantly felt forced to abandon it. He judged the math too cumbersome compared to the elegant, complex formulation we all inherited.
And the attempts continued, didn't they? People were really bothered by this idea that reality needed imaginary numbers.
For sure. In the 1960s, you had Stuckelberg take up the challenge. He proposed representing a complex system in dimensions using a real system in second dimensions.
So basically dedicating one real number for the real part and another for the imaginary part.
That was the idea. And it was promising, conceptually, but his real number theory had acknowledged discrepancies. It just didn't quite work.
It couldn't reproduce everything.
Right. It ran into some issues with core quantum principles, like the uncertainty principle itself. And that suggested that complex numbers weren't just convenient, they might actually be essential.
Which brings us to the modern era. Just a few years ago, the consensus seemed sealed.
It did.
There was this highly cited 2021 article that argued QT fundamentally needed complex numbers, that any real number theory would be inconsistent with the standard rules of the game.
And that seemed to close the book, really. It enshrined dollars as a necessary feature of physical reality.
But here is where it gets really interesting, and it's the core of the source material for our deep dive today.
Yes.
This new research basically says that conclusion that complex numbers were fundamental was, and I'm quoting, premature.
A great word for it. The core thesis is that a complete real number quantum theory, or RNQT, is fully consistent with every standard postulate and maintains all the key features, especially this really tricky concept of representation locality.
And the ultimate payoff for you, the listener, is this. The findings prove that the standard complex quantum theory and this new real number one are, well, they're experimentally indistinguishable.
Completely. You can't tell them apart. We're talking about two mathematically different descriptions of the universe that give you the exact same answer every single time you run an experiment.
Okay, so to really get this, we have to look at the challenge. Conventional QT is built on a handful of axioms, these postulates 1 through 4.
Right. They define the whole mathematical structure, the Hilbert space where states live, the states themselves, these density matrices we call row measurements, and crucially composition.
And composition is the stumbling block, right? That's postulate 4.
That's the one. It states that when you combine two systems, say system S and system T, their combined mathematical space is the tensor product. And this is where the physics of locality gets encoded into the math.
It's called representation locality.
Exactly. And it's paramount because it connects our math to the physical world. Let's use the source material's simple thought experiment. Imagine two non-interacting atoms, S and T. Their combined state is rho tensor sigma.
Okay, so atom S is in state rho, atom T is in state sigma, standard stuff.
Now, a scientist hits atom S with a tiny laser pulse. The state of S changes to rho prime. Atom T is completely untouched. It's still in state sigma. Physically, the change was local.
Right.
Representation locality demands that the mathematical description also changes locally. The new state has to be rho prime tensor sigma. The part of the math describing T, the sigma, must remain mathematically unaffected.
That just seems obvious. I mean, if the math for the second atom had to change just because you poked the first one, you'd have a non-local theory. It would violate common sense.
And that is precisely why previous real number attempts failed.
Ah,
When physicists tried to just swap complex numbers for a real taken representation, but kept all the other rules the same, they lost locality. A local physical change would force this non-local scramble in the math for the untouched atom.
so the math was fundamentally inconsistent with the physics.
Precisely. And this is where the new paper identified what they call the mathematical trap. In standard complex QT, the tensor product is almost always done using something called the Kronecker product for matrices. It works perfectly.
The Kronecker product is just a specific recipe for combining the elements of two matrices into one big one, right?
That's right. And the trap was that earlier physicists just assumed this convenient recipe, the Kronecker product, was the only valid way to do it in the real number world, too.
So wait, they didn't break physics, they just inherited a bad habit from the complex world.
That's a great way to put it. The new work shows that the core real postulates do not force you to use the Kronecker product. They failed to look for a different combination rule that would work for the real numbers. By relaxing that one mathematical assumption, the whole door opened up.
Okay, now we get to the breakthrough. The mission was to build a representation that works, is local, and doesn't use a dollar.
And they did it in two steps. First, the local transformation, and second, a new global combination rule.
Let's start with the local part.
Okay, for step one, they needed a way to translate a complex system into a real one. They defined a map, they call it gamma. This map takes any complex description, a Hermitian matrix in d dimensions, and maps it into a real matrix in Tekken dimensions.
And the Q-Tek doubling makes intuitive sense. It's like a single complex number needs two real numbers to describe it, a real part and an imaginary part. You just need double the space.
Exactly. And the magic is in how they encoded the numbers 1 and I using 2x2 matrices. They defined I as the identity matrix to represent 1 and J as the specific antisymmetric matrix to represent I.
I see. That matrix J, it effectively performs the operation of multiplying by I using only real numbers. If you multiply a real vector by J, it rotates it by 90 degrees, which is exactly what I does algebraically. That's incredibly clever.
It's the perfect analog. Using these substitutions, every complex state or measurement is mapped smoothly into what they call a special symmetric matrix in this new real space. And the map works perfectly. It's linear, it's invertible, you can always map back.
So the local problem is solved. For one atom, we have a working real description. But the big task is still combining two of them while keeping locality. This needs that new global rule.
That's definition 2 in the paper. The new combination rule, which they call tensor. This rule governs how you put two of these special symmetric matrices together.
And what's fascinating here is that this new rule isn't based on some exotic new physics. It's built specifically to mimic the behavior of the complex tensor product.
It's a purely constructive proof. They built the mechanism, this tensor, explicitly so that it commutes with the local gamma map.
Ah, and that's the mathematical linchpin.
That's the whole game. That commuting property guarantees that if atom S changes locally, the description of atom T remains mathematically untouched. It satisfies representation locality.
And that's theorem 1. This alternative rule, tensor, satisfies all the real postulates and gives you a full, locally consistent, real number quantum theory. They didn't change the physics, just the math they used to combine the physics.
Exactly. And this brings us to the monumental implications. If this RNQT is mathematically sound, the most critical question is, does it work in the lab?
And the answer is yes.
Yes, because the RNQT reproduces the exact same measurement statistics as the conventional complex QT.
So if I'm an experimentalist and I measure the spin of a particle, the probability I calculate using the complex way is identical to the probability from the real way.
Identical. They share an identical Born rule analog. This statistical identity is the reason the two theories are, by definition, experimentally indistinguishable.
You literally cannot design an experiment to tell the difference.
You can't.
But if the math is so different, I mean, real two-gas matrices versus complex matrices, how can we be certain they don't diverge when we scale up to, say, a quantum computer? Is there any corner case?
The guarantee comes from the isomorphism. Because the map is invertible and it preserves all the important algebraic structures, the product, the trace, the positive spectrum, they are mathematically equivalent representations of the same physics.
So key quantum features like entanglement are maintained.
Absolutely. The line between separable and entangled states is preserved. Pure states are preserved. And critically, they preserve tomographic locality.
Which is the idea that you only need local measurements to figure out an unknown state.
That's right. And the fact that RNQT preserves that confirms how deeply consistent the whole structure is. They even address dynamics, how systems evolve.
Ah, the fifth postulate, the famous complex von Neumann equation.
The one with the I right in the middle, yes.
Mhm.
They showed that by applying their transformation, this equation has a direct real counterpart. It uses the real representations of the state and the Hamiltonian, and it describes the exact same evolution.
So it's complete, a consistent, experimentally sound formulation of quantum mechanics that entirely avoids using $8.
It is. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the philosophical debate reignites.
Right.
Some might still argue that because the real theory is defined by a mapping from the complex one, it merely simulates the complex QT, that complex numbers are still somehow more real.
The difference between a simulation and the thing itself. But the paper has a powerful counterargument using history, doesn't it?
It's a perfect analogy. Classical wave theory was originally formulated using entirely real functions, sines and cosines.
Sure.
Complex numbers were only adopted later because Euler's relations made the calculations vastly simpler.
And today, no physicist would ever argue that the complex wave formulation simulates the real one. It's just a better tool.
Exactly. And this suggests the same thing holds true here. Complex numbers in QT are powerful, but they might just be a mathematical shortcut for a reality that is fundamentally real valued.
And the second counterpoint is the idea of isomorphism. In physics, both the complex formulation and this new real one are abstract mathematical descriptions of physical reality.
And because they are mathematically isomorphic equivalent representations, neither one can logically be said to simulate the other. They are two different languages saying the exact same thing about the universe.
So what does this all mean for the quest for unification? For decades, complex numbers have been seen as this bizarre, uniquely quantum feature that sets it apart from gravity and relativity.
Well, it provides a profound conceptual unification. It shows that quantum theory, like classical mechanics and relativity, doesn't intrinsically require complex numbers. The paper argues that this apparent necessity might have been an obscurifying factor in the massive challenge to unify quantum theory with gravity.
You remove that non-standard requirement, and you simplify the conceptual landscape. You bring QT closer to the mathematical foundations of other successful theories.
It really shifts the role of complex numbers in physics. Their utility is confirmed, they are incredibly powerful, but they are demoted from a fundamental requirement of reality to a purely mathematical convenience.
It forces us to question every other mathematical structure we rely on.
And that raises an important question for future research. If this long-held necessity for complex numbers was just an artifact of mathematical representation, what does that imply about other strange mathematical structures we currently rely on to describe reality? Are we certain that those structures are fundamental, or might they also have simpler, more unified, real number counterparts just waiting to be discovered? It's a powerful reminder that we should always look beyond the most convenient mathematical path to verify the truest underlying physical structure.